let's start the class. The class is a continuation of the Shar Habitachon, which is the gate of trust. We will now today be doing the Rabbeinu Bachya Ibn Pikudei's introduction. Last time we did our own introduction. Now we're going to do his introduction. And if you remember that he was born in Zaragoza, which later became Spain, and it was around 1180 that he wrote this book. So it is, I guess, the 12th century in Zaragoza, which is where many philosophers at that time lived, which they called it the Golden Age, if you remember from last week. I'm going to show you a very funny, actually, video. Oops. Okay. Okay, let me just see where's the... Okay, can you see the screen? Okay, I think I have to unshare this for a minute because I forgot to put audio. Okay, so share screen. Let me put audio, sorry. Okay, so this is, let me know if you cannot hear this, okay? Okay, here we go.
יש נהג אחד שהוא נהג טוב. רק בורא עולם. חוץ מבורא עולם אף אחד אין נהג טוב בעולם. למה? למה? הנה השם נתן לו בריאות, חוכמה, עיניים טובות לראות, גם הוא יודע את מלאכת הנהיגה טוב. למה הוא לא נהג טוב? כי נהג הכי טוב שהוא בן אדם, הראייה שלו מוגבלת. רק הנהג שהוא בורא עולם הוא רואה את הכל. הוא רואה מה שאתה רואה בעיניים וגם מה שאתה לא רואה בעיניים. לכן הוא יכול לתכנן את הנסיעה כי הנהג הכי טוב. וזהו, פתאום, בשניות, פתאום נכנס רכב. וזה משנה לך את כל מהלך הנהיגה שלך, שיכול להכניס לך סכנה. אין. לכן אין נהג טוב, יש נהג טוב אחד שקוראים לו בורא עולם. ועוד דבר, טוב, אתה נהג טוב, נניח טוב, החלטנו שאתה נהג טוב, טוב, יאללה. אבל אתה יכול לנהוג מקסימום את הרכב שלך, אתה יכול לנהוג את כל הרכבים, אתה נהג טוב, והרכב היה נכנס בך, מצוין. אתה ממש נוהג לפי הכללים, משהו הבא לזמן. אבל הרכב היה נכנס בך. אתה לא יכול לנהוג את כל הרכבים. משהו, תנהג לנו את הרכב שלנו, שיתאים לכל, שתנהג את כל הרכבים שכולם, רק הוא נוהג את כל הרכבים, הוא היחידי שנוהג את כל הרכבים באותו שנייה. תראה איזה פלא זה, תראה איזה נהג זה, תראה איזה נהג זה בורא עולם.
So here we have this idea that God is the driver. And it's interesting that there's only one good driver in the world. And if we have to trust that driver, that he is driving properly. So every year we pray on Yom Kippur, all the things that we would like to have. But how do we receive all the sustenance? We need to do something to make a vessel for it to come down at the specific time that we need it. So going to this idea of trust. Trust is important, but we also have to make a vessel. If we don't make a vessel, then the trust is not worth anything. Okay? So King David, if you remember, he said many different things in his Psalms. And one of the things he said is that God is with me. God is always with me. Even though there are different problems in my life, God will always be with me. So remember that God is with you. Like an example would be the story of Sarah. Sarah is our foremother. She and our forefather Abraham did not have children for many years. And she kept up the faith But then God said, yes, you're going to have a child. So she started to laugh. What does it mean that she was laughing? It means that she was happy. When you are happy, things go above nature. So you have to keep that positive feeling in order for things to happen. Because our personal God, we pray to our personal God. That's why it says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is the God, and God is our God, and God is one. What does it mean God is our God? God is our personal God. So we pray to him. So we need to get out of this ordinary zone and try to go above and beyond. So we know that in the story of our forefather, Abraham, what happened? Abraham was living for 75 years in Ur Kasdim. And all of a sudden, God came to him and said, Lech lecha, go away from your father's house. And he had to go. It's Abraham had to go out of his comfort zone and who he is and get to another place. So it's not easy for us to get out of our comfort zone and actually trust that whatever God does is good and whatever God does is the right thing. So divine providence is something that we learn from the Baal Shem Tov. There are two types of divine providence. There's the inner divine providence and there's the outer. The inner means that I go above and beyond, and so therefore God gives me above and beyond. The outer is that I go through nature. The outer means I go through nature, and when I believe that everything needs to be a natural cause and in a natural way, then everything I receive is received naturally. Remember the story of Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob, who was the third forefather. So there was Abraham, there was Yitzchak, and there was Yaakov, who was Jacob. And so Jacob had a son named Joseph. And Joseph had brothers who were jealous of him. And they went and they sold him. You can think, oh, that's such a terrible thing that Joseph got sold. How can God let that happen? Do we know what happened to Joseph at the end? Yes, we know, but Joseph didn't know. We know that at the end, he became the second to the king, meaning that he got a very high position in Egypt. He would never get such a position had he stayed at home. So it's interesting that sometimes things happen to us and we think to ourselves, wow, this is really terrible. But no, we need to stop and say, maybe it's something good. Maybe there is a good thing here. And maybe it will be like the story of Joseph. We don't know. Trust means I don't rely on things. What are the things that I should not rely on? Anybody? I'll give you one example. Don't rely on other people.
I was about to say that.
Oh, very good. Very good. Why should we rely on other people? Why should we rely on other people?
Because first of all, other people might have their own agenda. Mm-hmm. Secondly, other people might even have a different perspective what's good for you. So it's definitely not with what Hashem thinks what's good for you.
Hashem knows what's good for you, and not just thinks, but Hashem knows what's good.
Right. I'm sorry. Yes. So yeah, those two.
Okay. And what happens if we rely on another person? That person what can happen to that person? Either they can get hurt. Maybe that person can move away from you, start living in a different city. Maybe that person is untrustworthy and hurt you. I mean, there's so many things that another person can do if you rely on another person. Or the person can just leave and go off to Timbuktu. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow can always be something different. And that's why the only one we could rely on is God, because he's not going away. We don't need to flatter him. He will give us whatever we need, even if we don't deserve it, right? Because that's what we learned last week, remember? Even if we don't deserve it, he'll still give it to us. So what else shouldn't we rely on? Something within yourself. What can't you rely on?
The pride, the overconfidence, the idea that you can do it all by yourself.
Right, your wisdom, right? Who you are as a person. Right, remember the story with Moses? God said, speak to the rock, and what did Moses do at the end? He hit the rock. So even Moses, who was the brightest and had the most chachma, wisdom that there was in the world, still made a mistake with his wisdom. He calculated it wrong. So even who says we're calculating it properly? So we can't rely on our own wisdom, right? What else can't we rely on?
I'm sorry, didn't talk enough today. On other like sorcerers or, like some
astrology. Good.
Right.
Astrology, sorcerers, etc. Why?
Because we can alter our future, we can alter our path.
Right, because when it comes to the Jewish nation, it's ein mazel b'Yisrael. There's no mazel. Mazel means luck in the Jew. In other words, we don't go by astrology. Also, according to Chassidus, it says ayin mazel b'Yisrael. Ayin means nothingness. The mazel, the Jewish mazel, is nothing. In other words, we can change our mazel any single moment. That's why when God took Abraham out to the stars, what did he say? Took him above the stars. And it says, you, the Jewish people, are above the stars. You will not be stuck by the stars. Excellent. Very good. Anything else? You're doing very well today. Anyone else want to try? There's one more that you haven't thought of. Actually, two more.
We have to be careful to not, you maybe addressed it, but it's in a slightly different way, to not rely too much on our inner voice, because it could be our Yetzer Hara trying to convince us of something.
Right, so that's going back to the wisdom. That's a great way of putting it, that it's the Yetzer Hara sometimes telling us to do bad things. So it's not necessarily the good part of our wisdom. Okay, so in other words, you're saying that your animalistic wisdom you shouldn't listen to, but your godly wisdom, maybe you should. So that makes sense also. What else? How about your talents and strengths? Should you rely on your own talents and your own strengths?
Yes and no, probably assuming that, before acknowledging that all talent and strength come from Hashem.
Right, so it's
and
a gift.
It's a gift, right?
Right. So in other words, you can't be... What did you say?
I said that's exactly word to word what I was going to say. So
wow. Okay. It's a gift from God. Your talent and your strength are gifts from God, and they're not something that you can rely on. Do you remember who was the strongest person in the prophets? Very strong person. We actually, the secular world talks about this guy all the time.
Shimshon.
Excellent. Very good. Shimshon, Samson. Remember Samson and Delilah? You hear that all the time in the secular world, right? Shimshon was actually, he was called Shimshon Hagibur. Shimshon, the strong one. But look what happened at the end with his strength. He had strength, but he used his strength in the wrong ways. He went and he got a woman and he told her the secret of his strength. So, he ended up with a non-Jewish woman. And you see what he did with being a very strong person. He thought that nothing can ever take him down. And it did. So strength is a good thing, but not necessarily the most important thing. It's only if we recognize, again, that this is a gift from God and your talents are also a gift from God. If you recognize that, then you will stay on the right path. In other words, we're not trusting our own talents and strengths. We are trusting God because he gave us those talents and strengths. Very good. Okay,
Mattie, can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Just one of those days.
It's okay. I'm fine with it. I'm great because this is a very important subject.
How would you appropriately react to a compliment? Like when people pay you compliment, in particular non-Jewish people, and you don't want to get to the whole long story of taking Kabbalah, and how it is, and they say, "Oh my goodness, you're so smart," and in my mind,
thank you. Just be grateful. Thank you.
It's not me. It's just
or you can say, "Thank you, God, for giving me this talent." If that helps you.
Okay.
Because in other words, you need to take the compliment because it's not about you personally. It's the gift that God gave you.
Right.
So when you can't say, I don't know the compliment. It's not true. No, do never say it's not true. Say, thank you. I appreciate it. This is an amazing gift from God.
Thank you. That's
and also you have to, especially if it's someone that you say like a non-Jew, so they may believe differently. You still would want to say thank you because for them, they're thinking they're giving you a compliment. They're being nice to you, and to not appreciate it or say thank you is kind of like, putting them down.
Well, we also learned that we need to be grateful, right?
Yes.
We need to be grateful for everything that God gave us. So it's fine to say thank you and recognize that God did give you that talent. And whatever you did good for someone else, it's because God gave you the talent. But at the same time, you need to be grateful that somebody recognized it.
Thank you.
So that makes sense. Okay, so we said others, we said talents and strengths, we said wisdom, we said mazel. We are missing one. The one that we're missing is, you're gonna laugh, wealth. Okay, so do not rely on your wealth. Okay. Because what does it say? Ezehu Gibor, Ezehu Asher, Hasameach Bechalko. Anybody who's really rich is the one that is happy with whatever they have. Of course. But you remember this, that wealth is a test. So we can't rely on the wealth because we have to know that this wealth came from God. It's like remember there was a story, I don't know if you remember the story, about a rabbi who was friends with this very poor man. He came to him and he said, "I'm very poor. It's so hard." He says, "I will bless you with richness, but I want you to remember that you need to do the same things that you do now," because this man was a very big person for welcoming guests. So he says, even though you're poor and you welcome guests now, I want you to remember when you get rich, that you also have to welcome guests just the same. About a year went by and this man became rich, and the rabbi came to visit him one day and he knocked on the door. And the butler said, "No, you can't come in here. Sorry, we don't let everybody in here." And he says, "No, I must speak to this man." So he said, "No, you can't come in." So he was arguing with him and arguing. Finally, the guy in the background heard somebody talking. So he came out and he saw it was the rabbi. And he says, "Rabbi, what are you doing here?" He said he didn't want to rebuke him. So what did he do? He says, "Let me come into your study. I want to tell you something." He comes into the man's study and he says, "Look at the mirror that you have in your study? What do you see? And the man says, I see myself. And he says, look out the window. What do you see? He says, I see people. I see lots of people outside. So he says, do you know the difference between the mirror and the window? Why in the mirror I see myself, and in the window I see others? So he said to him, he said, because in the mirror there is silver on the back of the mirror, and so therefore I see myself. So the rabbis turned to him and said, yes, there is silver. It's the biggest test for you. You only see yourself. You don't see others. If you don't change now, you will be poor again. So he said, okay, thank you. And actually, the rich man started to give money to all the guests in the whole area. So we see that, and we understand that richness is something that we shouldn't rely on, because today we have it, tomorrow we don't. But we know that when a person is poor, it is also a test. Do you know the story of Rebbetzin? I don't know if you remember, that's my favorite character in the world. A man was coming to Rebbetzin because Baal Shem Tov told, actually I think it was the Mizrash Magid maybe, that told him to go see Rebbetzin because he wanted to see the poorest person ever. He came to Rebbetzин's house, and of course Rebbetzin had no bed, just some straw on the floor. Everything was empty. The roof was leaking. His kids had no food. It was really bad. So he walked in and he goes, hello, Rebbetzin. So Rebbetzin said, hi, it's glad to see you. Why did you come today? He said, I wanted to see the poorest man. So Rebbetzin turns to him and goes, you came to the wrong place. I'm not the poorest man. Interesting to see that Rebbetzin did not even admit or feel that he was poor. So this is also the test of poor people. So we can't rely on being rich. Again, going back to this idea of wealth. What should we do with our wealth? What is, to show God that we have trust, what should we do with our wealth?
Share with others.
Yeah.
Right,
Make
share
the
with
na- make the
others.
na-
How?
Make donations to the charity.
Okay, give to DACA, right? What else can we do to share with others?
We can use it towards other people's benefits, like what you've been doing with the house, when you're having people over, right, and provide Jewish education, right, and services, or you can invite people over and have people around, like if you have a house, so there should be the house should,
Full of guests.
every part of your wealth should be in service to something. That's
Right.
what we want to do.
Right, very good, very good. And also a very important factor, what you talked about before, is being grateful, okay? Another thing you can do with your money is buy religious items, like buy candlesticks for people to light Shabbos candles. Also, if somebody wants to take a loan, give them a loan and don't ask for the money back right away. And don't ask for interest. You can do that too. Or another thing you can do is also, if you do a kindness, don't expect to get paid back. That's also a very big test for a rich person. Okay? To do kindness and not to say to others, oh, you know what I did for this one, and I did for that one, and I did. You make people feel really bad. So that's another thing to do with the rich people. So here is the difference. Let me share the screen about the difference between trust, and I'll tell you what it is in a minute. Alchemist, but I'll explain to you what it is in a minute. Okay, share. Okay. So an alchemist is a guy during the Middle Ages that would work through metal, okay, and make different things. So what is the difference between an alchemist and having trust in God? Does anyone want to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Just let's make it a little bit bigger.
Okay, sure.
I can do it. Okay.
Actually, I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could, but oh,
okay.
I know how. Here we go. Is that bigger?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Materials. Worries how to attain materials for his work. God will find a way.
Okay, so if you worried about what you will find to get to do your work, it drives you crazy. You get all worried. How am I going to get this? How am I going to get that? But trust in God means God will always find a way to get you the materials. What are you worried about? Okay, do the second one.
Harm. It can be harmed through labor. God is safe from harm.
So he is safe from harm, meaning that if he trusts in God, then he is safe from harm. But if he is an alchemist, he can be harmed through his labor because he's working so hard. Okay, do number 3.
Advice. Alchemists scared to share information. God has nothing to hide.
So trusting in God, you have nothing to hide. Okay? Okay, go on.
Stock. Always concerned if he is stacking correctly. God doesn't need materials.
Right, exactly. Okay, what about fear?
Fear. Worried that people will find out his secret. And for God, his secret is God.
Right. So in other words, if you have a job, you're always worried that somebody will find out the secrets on how to do the certain things. We don't have secrets. We don't need to have secrets because we need to have trust in God that everything's going to work out well at the end. Okay, go on.
Health. Wealth does not prevent illness. If you, with God, you are in good hands.
Right. Okay, next, 7.
Sustenance. Gold doesn't always buy food. God provides food directly.
Right. Okay, 8.
8, on the go, always on the move, afraid of being caught. God is happy where he is.
If you trust God, you're happy where you are.
We are. Because you know that everything what happens for the best because it comes from God. Reward. At most secured against, so alchemist at most secured against poverty. And
at the most, he's secured against the poverty, right?
Right.
If you trust in God,
you material and spiritual reward.
In other words, if you trust in God, you're going to end up having good in both material and spiritually. Okay.
Right. Community. Alchemist is scared of others. God is a benefit to others.
So if you trust in God, it's a benefit to you, right?
And to you
others
and to
also.
Others. Yeah.
To you and to others, right? Yeah. So in other words, what he's basically saying, this is financial satisfaction is when we trust in God, because if you don't trust in God, all these things can go wrong. I mean, you worried, you have to work hard, you're concerned, etc., etc. I mean, all these things happen. Okay, so now we go to the question, how do we stop worrying? Okay, which is interesting because we already talked about this a couple of times. Remember when we talked about happiness, there's a lot of the stuff here that we can go back to. Okay, do you remember what it said? King Solomon said, Daiga ba'adam yishichena. When a person has a worry in his heart, he needs to either push it away or speak to someone. Do you remember that? So when we're worrying, the first, number one, how do we stop worrying? You talk it over with a friend, right?
Or with yourself. Can
No,
you talk
with a
That's
over
the
friend.
second one. The second one is you control your mind. So that's talking it over with yourself. In other words, you don't talk about it with yourself so much. You know why? Because the more you talk about it with yourself, the more you're going to worry. So the best thing is to put something else in your brain instead of that. Remember when we talked about Yetzer Hara, meaning push it away, stop thinking about it, think about something more exciting and more happy. Stop thinking about the worrisome idea. So that would be number 2. Number 3, I find the hardest. Be in the moment. Don't think about the past problems or what you need to do in the future. And this is where our problems are usually the most. Why? Because most of the time we're either thinking about what happened before and why did we do this and why did we do that? We should have done it differently, blah, blah, blah. Or we think what I need to get done tomorrow. And we don't stay in the moment. When you stay in the moment and do one thing at a time, what happens? You feel better because you are doing one item at a time. Like a lot of times I'll be studying for something and then all of a sudden I remembered I have to call someone, or somebody's waiting for me tomorrow and I'm worried about how the meeting's going to go. That doesn't help you because you need to
Compartmentalize, yeah.
Right, your brain. In other words, put everything in files. Now I'm going to think about what I'm doing right now. I'm not going to think about what I need to do in 5 minutes. When I'm done what I'm doing now, then I stop and I say, okay, what goes next? Because if you put too many things together in your brain at the moment, what happens?
Mess.
A mess.
it overloads and you cannot enjoy it the moment or after.
Right. And you can't think about the moment that you're in. And you worry. You start to worry. Oh my God, something's going to happen. I need to go in 2 days to this place and do this thing and do something. Why are you thinking about what's going to happen in 2 days? Think about this moment. What do I have to get done right now? Not what I did yesterday and why I did it wrong. Because that's, I find the hardest thing. A lot of times I'll stop myself. I'm exercising and I start to think about other things. And I say, no, I'm exercising now. I need to think about my body. What happened last week? I was exercising and I was worried about something and I hurt my knee. Why? Because I wasn't into the exercise. I was into whatever else I had to do later. That's no good. So you need to just stick with whatever you're doing that moment and stop thinking about a million things at the same time. So that is one of the most important ways to stop worrying. Be in the moment. Okay? The number 4 is trusting in God, which is a big subject in itself. And we'll be learning about that next week too, a little bit more. That's a hard one. It's a very broad subject. Okay, that's number 4. Number 5 is live a purposeful life. What is my purpose? We talked about this a lot when we talked about happiness, right? That it's important to have purpose in life. If we have purpose, then we continue to go on in our life. It was interesting. We're talking about purpose in life. My son wants to be a mental health provider and he's starting his master's soon. I just was watching, I don't know what was this. I was just watching his, he had this series on YouTube and I started to listen to it and it's so much information. I was like, wait a second, how does he know so much? Like, how did he get all this information so quick? He had these like PowerPoints and he was talking and he had like 7 full videos full of things, about people, about mental health, how people should react and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I can't believe that. So you see, when a person has a purpose, he can do anything. He can continue on and just go and go and go and go and go. And it was like, to me, it was like unbelievable that a person can think of all these things at once, because you know why? He has a purpose. So he listens to every single video that there is on YouTube, on what do you call it, on whatever, Facebook or whatever. Anywhere you can find a video that talks about how you should live your life, he's on it, because he has a purpose and he's happy, and it makes him happy when he does that. So that's important, is to live a purposeful life. And everybody has to think, what is my purpose? And stick to your purpose and just keep going with that purpose. Okay, so that's number 5. And number 6, if you don't want to worry, fake it till you make it. Pretend you're not worried. Put a smile on your face, be in a good mood, and then you won't have to worry at all, right? So those are a few little tips that we put in for not to worry, okay? Those are most things we've already learned in the happiness, in the joy, remember the joy series. So I just reviewed them because I think it's really connected to this idea of trust. So what are the material benefits of trust?
Less stress.
Less stress in what? You're saying
Daily
less stress,
life.
stress in what?
Just daily activities. If you're trusting
Okay, in daily activities. Also, what about in getting a job? Right? So it's not just the daily activities, but it also can be, as you're working, you have less stress. You don't think about all the bad things that are happening. Like an example would be, your workers or your boss, you're not worried about them anymore. Like whatever they say, okay. You don't get upset or angry because everything is happening that's from God. Of course, you have to do your job, but it doesn't make you upset if you have a grouchy boss, right? So that really helps. You also don't want as many physical things. So you're not disappointed if you don't get the latest iPhone or the latest car or the most beautiful house, right? If you trust in God, that's not on your mind. That's not as important. Also, if you have to go to work somewhere, you don't need to travel all over the world to find a job, right? Because you know that God can give you a job in wherever you are. You also don't, like we said, like the alchemists, we don't engage in harmful employment. Also, if we're looking for a job, you're not worried if you don't work on Shabbat, you're not worried that you're not going to find a job. You know that you will find a job. And it's very interesting because you see people that come to San Francisco, and San Francisco is not very conducive to people who don't want to work on Shabbat. And you see people who really say, I don't want to work on Shabbat, and they find the job. They always manage to find a job. Even if they lose one, they can go find another one. And it's not that difficult if you stick to your guns. I'm going to mute everyone for a minute. I'm sorry, because there's too much noise here. Okay, so okay, so we said about the boss. And also, let's say you're selling merchandise. If you don't sell it today, you're not going to be upset, because who knows? If you're selling merchandise to someone and they don't buy it, who says tomorrow you won't get a better deal? Maybe they'll pay you more money. I mean, you don't know that either, right? So that could be another way to think about trusting in God. And you always remain happy. That's another benefit. Okay, so we know that God recreates the world every moment. That's why we have trust, because any moment or every moment, things can change, right? It doesn't have to be just because 3 minutes ago something was not working well, doesn't mean that this moment it's going to be different, worse, or the same. It could be better. If we believe that it will be better, it'll actually be better. It's like the story with the person who comes into an operating room, and he is from some barbaric country somewhere. I don't want to say a country because I don't know which one is, and I don't want to point fingers, but he comes from a place that there is no technology there, there's nothing, and he sees someone making an operation and taking off someone's leg. What is he going to think? It's going to kill him, right? Look, this doctor wants to kill this guy because he's removing his leg. But what he doesn't know, what he doesn't understand is that this guy has gangrene or something in his leg and he needs to remove it, otherwise he's going to die. So when we don't understand something, it doesn't mean that that's the way it's supposed to be. So we need to think about how that we need, in other words, we need to choose to trust in God. Okay, and remember, like we said at the beginning, that God is the driver of everything, everywhere. If you believe it will happen, you must really, really believe. A lot of times things don't go the way you want them to go. And if you actually sit there and say, I trust that whatever happens is going to be good, 99.9% of the time it is good. I never like to say 100 about anything. Okay, so everything is given to us as a loan. And any given moment, it could be taken from us or it could be given back to us. So you need to do your best right now at this moment and try to understand that, yes, we need to trust that everything is good and everything not necessarily according to nature, because according to nature, it might not look good, but at the end, it is good. Does anyone have any stories of something that they thought was not good and was good at the end? I know there's lots of stories like that. You thought,
Can I go first? My day.
Okay.
So
Go ahead,
it's
Ina.
like, before childcare, I used to work in the agency and I loved it, seriously. For 15 years, I made quite a career, from receptionist to VP. And every day I was so enthusiastic to go to work. And I remember very distinctly how one day I woke up and I didn't want to go to work. I just, that motivation was gone. And I tried twice as hard, and for better performance, I started being scolded. It's like instead of praises, like constant praises and acknowledgements and like, sunshine and, all the light of benefits, suddenly the same work was not good enough, and I couldn't understand what was going on. And it took me a couple of years and 3 employers before I realized that a certain part of my life is done.
Right. You have a new mission.
Exactly.
Right.
But
and God, and you needed to trust in God that your mission had ended at one part. It's a very interesting point because I had the same thing happen to me. I thought the same thing. I was also doing a school for many, many years. Right. And we, the school went down because the money part of it was gone. So I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. So I actually wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the Igros Kodesh, which is the letters of the Rebbe, many, many letters. I put it in one of the volumes and the Rebbe answered me, your mission has changed. Before it was quantities of people. Now it's about quality. So you see, this happens to a lot of people, that their mission can actually change. Right. And it's for the better. It's never for the worse. It's always for the better. Because I see how many people's lives I changed compared to that time that I had hundreds and hundreds of people coming through my school, through our programs. We had a huge food program. We had ESL classes, computer classes, I don't know, all kinds of kids activities in the building that we had. And then I realized I didn't do what God put me into this world for, because there was so many people coming through. I couldn't have done that. But now that I only have like a few people that I deal with, not as many as before, I see that people's lives get changed little by little, one person at a time. And that's just a different mission. So I get you that before your mission was all about helping adults. And now it's about, no, now you need to help children, because that's what your mission is right now. Excellent. Anybody else have a story? Okay, so basically what we need to do is we need to trust in God. This is the opening part. This is the introduction for the Gate of Trust. Next week, we will be going into the first and second chapter of this Gate of Trust. If we don't finish it next week, we probably won't finish it, but we will go on to other things and then we'll go back to it. Okay, let me close this. Okay.